one thing that we usually share with school districts when we first approach them is why local. I'm sure you all know the benefits of local, being farmers yourselves, but this is a great reminder for those school districts of there's so much value in doing local. So we go over some of the benefits to your local economy, keeping money in your community and supporting local agriculture and businesses. We go over the potential benefits, nutritionally speaking, of having fresher, higher quality produce. Oftentimes, as you may all know or remember from the times you were in school, school lunch isn't that great. And it has this general idea and stereotype of low quality, just bad food. So one of the benefits of local is you bring in quality, higher quality produce and products that actually can help elevate that idea and get more students to participate in lunch. There's also the added benefit of buying local to schools in that students can actually have a really great educational experience. So we've worked with farms, for example, in Sacramento with Fiery Ginger Farm, where the farm actually brings students onto their farm. They also go to classrooms and present on agriculture, so it's more of a holistic experience. It's not only the food, but it's the educational piece as well. And there's a whole slew of other benefits of buying local. So we kind of give this presentation to school district food service directors to help them get an awareness of some of these benefits of buying local, and that there's more community impact than there would be buying through your generic large-scale distributor.
Is anybody here bringing students onto their farms now?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of educational programs are you doing?
Just field trips.
Field trips, tours?
Yeah, elementary school. It's not really like a structured thing that I do. It's just more friends that I bring students over.
Very cool, especially with mushrooms. I'm sure there's a lot of interesting stuff to learn on this conference.
So as I said earlier, some of the points about farm to cafeteria specifically is the educational portion, and then there's also benefits of kind of unique promotions. So in school cafeterias, food isn't always the best, and there isn't as much of an educational experience when you're buying through distributors. So farm to cafeteria brings the opportunity to do unique promotional events. For example, a lot of school districts we work with have events like the Harvest of the Month program, where there's a product that's highlighted for that month. And actually, Mendel Lake Food Hub does a lot of work around Harvest of the Month events, but there's a specific product that would be highlighted, and then that product is brought in locally, ideally from farms in the county or the area, and then there's an added educational experience. So there's handouts for the students on the benefits of that product. There can also be a lot of other activities. For example, Center for Eco-Literacy does a lot of cool hands-on activities with products like radishes and other fruits and vegetables to kind of get the kids to get their hands dirty, potentially go out in the field and actually be active with the food and learn about it while having fun. And then there's also signage and marketing material, so the students can actually see, all right, this product is coming from this farm. So we'll have things like farmer trading cards or other information about the specific farm to educate the students, and hopefully in turn educate the parents as well and get them to be more active in their local food system. So farm to cafeteria does have a lot of benefits, but really one of the main ones is that community impact and actually connecting the farmer to the student and establishing that local community-based food system.
What are some of the benefits that you all see? Why would you want to sell to schools in this area from a market side standpoint or a community standpoint? Moving volume. And I meant especially in areas that school districts are really some of the biggest volume purchasers on a regular food service basis around, I'm sure. What about, yeah?
So I know with schools, they're limited on their budgets, but so from a farmer standpoint, it seems like you sell, but you're probably not making money, you're probably losing money, at least for smaller farmers. So what do you see, how can that improve so that farmers can make a living out of it?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's a combination of things to answer it, I think, from what we're seeing. On the system and working with school districts and regions level, governor's new budget, he just proposed a $60 million addition to the California school meals budget, which is supplementary to the National School Lunch Program, USDA Entitlement Foods Program, and National School Lunch Program budgets. So it'll actually add 13 cents a meal to California school districts. So that right there is the biggest increase we've seen in a long time, and we're hoping to see that continue throughout this governor's time in office. We're gonna, at least there's a lot of groups advocating for it and continuing to push for it. That's one there, and then there are additional, like the unprocessed fruit and vegetable pilot program is a program that started a couple years ago that added a new funding that used to go to commodity purchasing to local vendors that's accessible in California. So we'll see and push for actual additional programs and budgets to increase that. Practically on the ground, it's a lot of education. We have some school districts that we go to, and the food service directors are like, doesn't matter what the price is. I'll work the rest of my budget, and I'll allow for a 75-cent or 65-cent per piece fruit item. That's an extreme example on one end. The extreme example on the other end is somebody who we show a price list to, and they say, that's more than a quarter, like don't even show me anything that has an apple that's more than a quarter again, or I won't talk to you. We don't like them very much anyways. But
sorry, just to chime in for a second. We have school districts on both ends
Yeah.
of that, and that's part of what I'm working with, and I'm trying to work more with the ones that are just like, we want the local food and increasing the amount that they buy. Yeah.
Thanks,
Sorry,
Robin.
just yeah.
No, Rachel. Robin's my sister. We asked Rachel to sit in to make sure we're providing the local perspective too. So thank you for jumping in. Please do. And so our job is to educate people to get somewhere closer to the middle of that. And we see a lot of, an example of fruit, of piece of hand fruit, we see a lot of 45-cent to 55-cent range, which the farmers that are small to mid-scale that we're working with are saying, okay, that's enough for me to be able to sell it and be able to at least break even and move volume.
When you're saying those prices, is that per pound? Or
Per piece.
Per piece?
Per piece.
Per apple?
Yeah. Yeah, so, and that's an interesting piece of it too, is that in the case of particularly hand fruit, within the size range that we're talking and within the category of fruit that they need to provide, which is any fruit that would qualify as a hand fruit, we're gonna break it down. The food service directors don't need it from you on piece price necessarily. That would be the hub or their job, but we're giving it to them in piece price, so they can, as soon as they see it, they say, yep, we'll buy that, and they can jump right into it.
And one other added thing is a lot of the school districts now are starting to get funds and pass bond measures and things like that to try and establish their own warehousing and their own central kitchens, which has been a big cost saver, and oftentimes districts will use those savings to try and purchase higher quality and local products so they can process them in-house and save that way. Save money that way.
Yeah.
So the Menlo Lake Food Hub received a farm to school grant. We're in our first of a 2-year period with that. We did a baseline survey, and the local schools in Lake and Mendocino counties are all over the map on how they use their food. We have Ukiah School District with less than 10% of the food that they bring in is they actually process it. So that means that they're using raw food and turning it into something. So using salad, lettuce and tomatoes and cucumbers and fruit and turning it into a meal, to some schools on the coast and going up to 50 to 75% of the food they bring in that they process. So you taking advantage of those things. So we have quite a diversity of schools that we're working with.
And just, sorry, one more little piece.
Please,
The Harvest of the Month program that I believe you brought up, that has been like one of the best ways that we've worked with schools, because it is selling a lot of volume. There's like a set budget. I can like contract farms ahead of time and be like, grow this thing. And yeah, that actually gives, it's a different kind of budget that we're working with as opposed to like what they would work with their everyday meal prep and things like that. And one of the things that I'm working on doing right now is actually expanding that program. And so I think that we're gonna, it looks like we're gonna be able to get the Harvest of the Month program out in Covelo, in Boonville, and in Point Arena. So that's kind of, I'm negotiating a lot of things and figuring out budgets and stuff like that. But so there's going to be like a lot of opportunity, and if any of you guys are interested in doing that sort of thing where we feature a crop, let me know. And that's another great way to work with schools, so you're not necessarily just constricted to, you know, they have 75 cents per meal or whatever, you know, like kind of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, and so that would start in August.
Yeah, so each school district that we work with, like, we talk and we figure out, like, here's the crop for this month and this month and this month, and we'll figure out the whole school year. And then that way, and that's kind of something that, like, we just started doing. So we haven't figured out starting the 2020-2021 school year. But once I have a list of crops, like, man, I'm gonna be calling all you guys and be like, plant 3 rows of this or whatever. And yeah, another thing that we're trying to do, Cinnamon Bear Farm is gonna be one of our first test runs, but he'll be doing the next harvest of the month, and he'll be going and speaking to the kids about the crops, and so get the farmer perspective on how to grow things. And so if anybody is interested in doing something like that, please let me know.
And
Yeah,
before
sorry.
any of the farmers speak, do you mind giving your name and farm so we can start getting to know? Sorry, I didn't ask before. Yeah, please.
Yeah, Randy, Round River Farm. A number of high schools are starting to offer culinary arts programs, and so they're vying for that. And then community groups will have them cook for a particular community event. Is that anything that you'd be connected with?
If we were asked to, especially if it were in like a system, sometimes when like a clinic that's doing prescription fruit and vegetables, or a culinary school, if it's small, we just send them to the farmer's market. It's not worth working with us to do it. But if it's like a group of them, then we'd be happy to. But it gets way easier when you get into that, because then you pull away all those federal compliance regulations and issues and meal patterns and all the stuff that's required for the school districts, and it becomes a lot more fun and a lot easier on the purchasing side. They usually don't have like a million sites to deliver to either, which is the case for a lot of schools.
So we should probably get back to your.
One thing I'll mention in the last one, you don't have to change the slide back, but is that access is another huge benefit for farm to school. So I know that's not going to mean anything for your sales, but for what it's worth, 40% of kids are eating most of their calories in schools, and schools in California are really vastly expanding their breakfast and supper programs across the state, increasing snacks that are available. So kids are really depending on school food for food security even more than they have been in the past.
So with that, the farm to school movement as a whole is growing, especially in California. We're blessed here to have a state where there's a huge diversity of crops, and institutions are starting to notice that. We talked to colleagues in other parts of the country, and there really isn't as much of that opportunity with farm to cafeteria. But we're blessed in California to have a wide range of crops, and with that has become an increased interest. So this kind of general local food movement has been expanding, and within farm to cafeteria, it's been expanding at a really fast rate. So in California, there's over 373 districts that do some sort of farm to cafeteria work. California as a whole has about 1,000 school districts, so that's a pretty solid chunk of the school districts in the state that have some sort of farm to cafeteria programming. And once you start looking at those numbers, it really starts to expand once you start looking at the number of schools and the number of individual students who get an impact, have an impact from that. And as Ben was discussing earlier, it's really crucial to reach those students when a lot of their nutrition is coming from schools directly. So the movement is steadily growing.
And a lot of food hubs are selling to institutions, and a couple depend on, or it's the majority of their sales, but Mendel Lake Food Hub's by far up and beyond the most school districts that any are working with. We're not going to go too much into this, especially with the time that we have, but a couple things to know about school food purchasing that you might hear the team, the North Coast and Opportunities Mendel Lake Food Hub team talk about is purchasing thresholds. So for a purchase under 10 grand, a school district doesn't have to get quotes or give it to the lowest price in this case, the hub. or a farmer. They would make that purchase and then they just have to rotate who they're purchasing from. Over 10 grand, or if they want to purchase from the same farm a bunch of times in a row, then they have to ask for 3 quotes and they have to give it to the lowest price. And then when you get over $250,000, or if you want to, because the formal bid process has other advantages, you don't have to base on lowest price anymore. You can actually score your bids. So what we'll be working on with the school districts that buy from the hub and from local area farmers is looking at their purchasing, identifying whether they're meeting that compliance without being an auditor. Like, we're not the state, we're totally independent. We're there to help them do exactly what they want to do in totally legal ways. And so for however they can buy the most from farmers. And so we'll work with them to identify where their purchasing falls in here, if they're doing it right now, and if not, we give them all the resources and language and the different bid formats and how to track all their purchasing for their audits and help them implement that. We're also in the process this year of turning that all into a software program that we just got funding to do. So we've worked on about well over 50 bids now with different school districts throughout the state.
And that under $10,000 range is really one of the main points, because there's really a lot more flexibility and a lot less auditing and review that goes on at that level from the California Department of Education. So any purchase under $10,000 essentially is a lot less limited than all the restrictions that go on once you get above that price range. These are some of the things that food service directors point out these are some opportunities for farms to kind of try and meet some of these needs. One very common thing we see is that school districts really want size consistency. It's one of the challenging things, and depending on the age range, school districts want different levels of sizes. So for example, elementary students might want a smaller apple size, like a 198. Middle school might want a different size, like a 172, something a little bit bigger. But that's a kind of common thing we've seen, a lot of challenges around consistency and size. But as I said earlier, as more districts are getting to begin processing in-house, that's becoming less of an issue. But there is definitely an opportunity to try and get some more consistent sizing. Again, with consistent sizing, so that was from Fort Bragg Unified School District's food service director that pointed that out, and we've heard this across the board with a lot of food service directors. Another point with potatoes. And then another interesting thing that a lot of districts are looking for are salad bar items, just things they could maybe chop up or process slightly and just put on a salad bar for students to eat. Fresh salad bars have become a much more common staple in school districts throughout the state, and they've become a lot more popular. Students really like it because they can pick out whatever product they want. So that's been a common thing, is a lot of school districts are looking for things like snap peas, broccoli, cauliflower, things that are radishes, things that you could just chop up or just toss in a salad bar and have the students put on their plate. So these are some of the common barriers and opportunities we've heard from growers, and we'd like to hear more from you all in a little bit when we have a breakout. But we've heard a lot of challenges with production planning, getting the right timing down, right volumes for school districts, and that's one of the really great things of working with the Food Hub. A lot of those challenges around volume can be met through aggregation at Food Hub levels. Another common thing we've heard is a lot of the marketing value gets lost. So when selling through wholesalers, so a lot of times a school district might actually be buying produce that's grown in California without them knowing that, because they're purchasing through a distributor, and the distributor might not have the transparency or traceability. So direct sales really helps with that there's an actual farmer's relationship, and that marketed value of adding local actually stays there when that relationship is built. And then another common thing we hear about is meeting food safety requirements in GAP with the ever-changing landscape of food safety regulations. And our colleague Kaylee is actually going to be giving a presentation on that later today, and some of the challenges around food safety and ways that Caff can support you with that. So one common thing we see is the farmers market and the CSA route. I'm sure, as you all know, you get some great pricing, but there's a lot of labor that can go into that. and you're not necessarily always going to get the best volumes. And then on the other end, you kind of have going through distributors or wholesalers where you get a lot of volume out, but not necessarily going to get a great price. So we like to think of farm to cafeteria as kind of an in-between there, where you could potentially get those higher volumes and the higher volumes that you would get at a farmer's market or a CSA, and you can get some better pricing than you would going through a wholesaler or a distributor.
Oh, you already started asking this one. And so just to talk a little bit more about what is the hub doing to, what are the hub's interactions, Rachel, with the school districts, and what do you find are some of the questions and benefits and challenges that you're hearing?
Yeah, I'm the person who's in pretty much constant contact with all the school districts, and it's actually been such a great part of my job. I love it so much. But yeah, it's challenging. Well, one of the things that we do is there is some forward contracting that we do with each school district, and we'll pick some farmers and some crops, and you know, a contract is signed of certain amounts that they're going to buy each week, and you know, we help make those deliveries and stuff like that. But and Caroline, you can also chime in because you've also done a lot with the schools. And
I was just sitting here being like,
but yeah, some of the challenges that I find when trying to sell them produce is pricing is definitely one of them, because we do have a lot of smaller farms here, and the amounts that they want, and again, the sizing thing is that has actually like been blowing my mind a little bit, of just like how constrained they are with like portion sizes and like all that sort of stuff. It's like, oh my goodness. But I would say pricing and then availability, like they want to sign contracts for, you know, a large amount of time, where it's like, well, this farmer's only going to have this, like we only have this crop available like 4 months out of the year in this county, and so like they get kind of hesitant to do that, because my understanding is because of all the bidding that they have to do at the beginning of the school year. So it's like it gets challenging for them of just like, okay, well, I'm going to have it 4 months here, and now I need to make a bid at this amount of time, and and yeah, so it's kind of this interesting puzzle that we're regularly working to try to piece together. So does that make sense?
Yeah. One of the things that I've worried about as I have been an NCO is part of the reason our food hub is so unique is that North Coast Opportunities has had a whole series of farm to school grants over many, many, many years. One of our colleagues, who you might know, April Cunningham, is one of the regional leads in the farm to school program in the whole state, and she's been working at NCO for 30 years or something. But way before the food hub even existed, she did all these trainings with school foods service staff, where they got grants to purchase in equipment that made it actually possible to process some of this produce. So part of the reason that we even have these relationships as fleshed out and solidified as we do is that April did all these trainings back in the day, and like some of the staff didn't even have the right tools to be shredding cabbage or dicing bell peppers or things like that. And so it's because of all that work that took many, many years and all kinds of money, like actual decades. That's why we're at where we are now, where people can actually be buying local produce. But we just want to grow it and make it even bigger and better.
Yeah. Thank you. That's
The
great
other thing
background.
that came up, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and the North Coast Opportunities folks that started that were really like some of the pioneers of farm to school in the state. One of the things that came up at the end of the last session was the seasonal issue. So the most product is available in summer, and the schools reduce their purchasing like 90% during the summer. So that's definitely something that is probably a big challenge for you all, I imagine, too.
Yeah, and then another thing that we run into sometimes, or I have, is staff turnover, which, you know, we can't really control or anything like that. But then it's this whole like, I have to reintroduce what the food hub is and like our relationship and we have this contract and and so that's just personally for me a challenge is regularly keeping in touch and start turnover.
Yeah. Which is probably more, like a little bit less than in retail, but still a lot.
Yeah.
So some of the ways we kind of one of the really important things we see with farm to school sales is really the relationship building and trying to establish, as you kind of point out, there's a lot of turnover at times, but how do you establish relationships that are going to last a longer period of time? And just relationship building is really key to a lot of this because that's where a lot of the value of local is actually being able to talk to the farmer or the food hub and start building those relationships and understandings of what is needed on the farmer end and on the food service director end. So a common thing we see with food service relationship building is we'll start off just by discussing, talking to the food service director about what their current operations are like. Do they have any processing equipment in-house? How much are they purchasing a year? How many delivery sites do they have? Are there specific products that they need more of or that they don't really like as much? So we kind of do a broad assessment of where their department is at. And then we look at their processing and then their menus and seasonality and try and help them do some better menu planning. You know, oftentimes we see a lot of school districts where they're buying bananas year round, where they're not even American products, or they're buying papayas and things like that. How do we help them? One of the things we discuss with them is how we can help them shift to products that are going to align with seasonality more than the products that they might currently have.
On that note, one of our regional food directors mentioned something about a new mandate about buying American only. Is that something you could go into?
Yeah, so it's actually been required for a while, the Buy American provision. By law, school food service in the United States needs to purchase American product unless that product isn't available in the United States. And if that product isn't available in the United States in general, then they have to apply for a waiver. So the most common two are probably bananas and papayas. There's a lot of times that waivers are applied for that. But what a recent issue has been is a lot of these distributors can't track where all their product is coming from, and then the school districts end up with product that is not from the state, or they're just unsure where the product is coming from. So there's been a recent push from Representative John Garamendi's office, I believe, to try and really clamp down on the waivers and make it into, really codify that and make it required, because it's been in writing, but people aren't necessarily following it. And it's really not on the food service director's end. They don't know where their product is coming a lot of times from the distributors. So there's been that added pressure on distributors to try and really highlight and track where their product is coming from. And hopefully with this increased push and on the Buy American provision, that's gonna increase local sales, because if the distributors can't track it, the goal hopefully is a lot more of these school districts go out to farmers that they know that are growing the products in the States, rather than going through a distributor that might not be sure of where the product is coming from.
Especially with processed probably.
Definitely, yeah. So that's just kind of how our relationship building goes with food service directors. We learn about who they're buying, if they're an exclusive distributor, what their contracts are like, all their procurement requirements and things like that. And then our next goal would be to establish some short-term goals with them. So maybe something around a harvest of the month to try and get them to buy one local product for a harvest month of promotion once a month or once every other month, just to kind of get the ball rolling. And then as the school year goes on and develops and their purchasing increases, then we kind of establish more long-term goals that are a couple years out, maybe look into forward contracting or other options like that.
And the biggest thing with the food service directors that's a difference from any other customers is the timing of their need for availability. So even if the growers or the hubs aren't exactly sure what's going to be available in what volumes, if they know in general enough to say, we're going to be growing root vegetables during these 3 months and this is what generally will be available, even that is enough information for the food service directors to be able to plan and say, okay, I've got this 2 or 3 months of peak season that I can try to get it locally for this time of year. Because they're making those menus 6 months to a year in advance. and they can, like, if you get a big buffer crop and you want to go and you like just realized you got it, so a lot of food service directors will say, okay, we can fit this into our menu next week or the week after, and we'll make an exception and we'll bring it in. And some of them even like it. Some of them get excited about that because it shakes it up and they feel like they're really supporting the farmer directly. Others, but in general, their planning is just way far ahead. Even getting availability a couple weeks in advance often isn't enough time for them to turn around, add it to their menu, run it by their RD, put it through their entire operational system, get it into their kitchens, get it it's just it's such a big chain of food service operation that they need a lot more time. So a lot of the work that we do is to try to get that information farther in advance, even if it's not perfect information.
Okay, so I'm going to be using what we learned this morning, open, direct, honest communication, because I know we're coming to the end of our presentation and also lunch is around the corner. So basically for farmer relationship building and connecting to food service directors depends on the region. What fits Caff's capacity is we really are on the ground boot type organization. And so depending on the region's needs, that's what we can help with. In the Salinas Valley, for example, it's primarily composed of larger big ag. And so the smaller scale organic farmer doesn't have a food hub like it does here in Mendel Lake. And so a lot of our work is building that relationship between the food service director and the farmer directly, which takes up a lot of time, and then also trying to educate the farmer on how the process works, because if it is a direct relationship between farm and school, it can get a little complicated and it could be long term, and farmers tend to get a little angsty because they have a crop waiting to be harvested and they want to sell it tomorrow, and that's not how it works. And so here in Mendel Lake with all of you, you're at an advantage because there is a hub in the middle doing a lot of the work that you're already doing. That already needs to be done in order to connect to a food service director. And so a lot of the support that we're going to be supporting you all in is production and crop planning, right? Like I said, more than often, a lot of farmers are looking to sell their apples or looking to sell their apricots tomorrow because they've already harvested them. But because you have Mendel Lake and because we could fit in that capacity where we're able to help you try to figure out the layout of the year or a year and a half in advance, and work with food service directors so that you're able to plan your crop accordingly, sell in larger volumes. Yeah?
So maybe this question more to the food hub, but like harvest of the month is great, like cause it's a large volume stuff, it's like, in a month, but like what about like more consistent sales to schools? Like, getting that stuff in the salad bar, like that needs to happen daily, weekly, so like how do we do that instead of just like, just a big lump sum like at the beginning of the month or at the end of the month or whatever?
That is actually that's literally why we're working on this and why we applied for this grant funding. Because we've just seen we need the time to be able to study this, because every school district is actually quite different with what they have the capacity and the desire and the budget to be processing. So we're trying to figure out who are the right people to be talking to, what exactly do they need, how much do they need it, when do they need it, how much can they pay, and then do that long-term planning where we can say, if you grow radishes, we're gonna hook you up with a school that will have it on the salad bar all the time. So over the course of both of these grants, that's what we're gonna be working on.
Yeah, and so leading us into our bigger conversation, which is going to be a smaller conversation, but it's the one where you can chat, is what challenges or opportunities for support are you experiencing currently for the food hub? I don't know if that's a direct question for you.
That's such a long question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I
Could've made all those work.
I could write an essay about that, and I have. I think staff turnover is probably one of the bigger challenges that we see at both farms and schools. Whereas schools will have someone who's a real champion of local food, and then they'll end up moving on to another job, as happens, and then a lot of their knowledge gets lost, and we have to start all over again selling the whole concept of why we're even doing this.
So who are the newbies, and can we train them first?
Ukiah Unified School District. Yeah.
All right. Spell it out.
And Lakeport.
And
Yep.
Lakeport.
Yep.
My obstacle is price. I sell a lot of pears and apples, seedless watermelon in there, and I'm dropping my obstacle.
Really?
And I'm being forced to compete with this stuff.
So how do we improve pricing expectations specifically around apples and pears and volumes?
That was actually like a very interesting challenge for me. Last fall was there was always like this standing agreement with Ukiah Unified specifically of like they're gonna buy Colleen's apples, and then there was like this apple tariff that happened, and they were like, oh, actually we're not gonna start buying these, we can get them so much cheaper here. And I think it took almost like it was like 2 months later that they actually started buying.
Are you City Farms? Yeah, we helped sell a lot of your apples to a district.
Yeah.
And we had a turnover issue, and we couldn't get them to buy that year.
Yep.
And it was the same, they had a bunch of staff turnover, and the food service director couldn't do it,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Last year was a trifecta of the triple S. Last year was a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I was just like literally calling every week, like, how about now? Can you take them now? We got them ready. And it was just, yeah, it was, well, it was just like they could find them cheaper, because, yeah, there's this whole thing with apples.
It's a fascinating economic issue that goes far beyond our county and even our region, where because of tariffs, huge growers that normally would export their apples were actually flooding a lot of the smaller local buyers that we generally work with.
Yeah.
And they were offering such cheap prices that some of our buyers were like, it would be crazy for us to buy the local one because we can get it for so cheap from.
Colleen has great prices
Yeah.
for her apples.
Yeah, Colleen does have amazing prices.
Obviously, too great. I mean, and on my end, I need more profit. I mean, within my wage, we have $2 more to go.
Yeah.
And it's your pruning thing, picking. So I'm thinking I'm eliminating apples from my program.
And that's something to, because it's interesting when that as an example, when that program started in the Bay and Sacramento areas that we were helping sell them, it was the opposite. So it was a big short year in the rest of the state for apples. And so anything they could get from this region that was like one of the only regions in the state that was doing well, we're gonna do even better. And then fast forward a couple of years and everything changes. And so what I'm wondering is, can we try to get a guarantee farther in advance this year with more resources and time and capacity to do that at prices that are appropriate? And if that's not our priority is always going to be trying to support the school districts in this area first. But if that's not the right customer, then can we go farther away and try to get that pricing that you need there? And so that would be something that we'd be able to start talking about this winter and spring, to try to get a guarantee in time that you feel comfortable continuing the program for October.
Pruning season right now, and I'm not gonna send a crew out.
Yeah. So we got to talk about it now then.
Yeah.
What are you doing for lunch?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. No, only half of our team is against me. Yeah, that's serious though.
I do think this is a great topic because we could probably talk about this a long time, but I love the idea of brainstorming this more over lunch.
Yeah.
Where we could think about different, since we have so many different sized farms, I do think schools are a great buyer for our region because of what, sorry, who said that, right? Like, they volume and you can get a buyer locked in. So, like, what would the best way for you to work with a school be? Maybe it's just producing like one crop for the salad bar, or maybe it's doing huge volume of apples. And another note is that this grant is not a specialty crop grant like the one that we used to work for. And so it's actually not limited to just produce necessarily. We could talk about other crops like grains and see if that's ever like anything that could work out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah,
I think maybe I don't even belong in this discussion at all, but will schools, I grow walnuts, nuts, almonds, peanuts, are they just out, period, for all school districts at any price?
I wouldn't say, no, not as a rule. I mean, a lot of school districts are very highly, allergen, high risk averse, and see any tree nuts as a potential allergen. But there's also other institutions too, and there's also schools that still buy nuts. So there might be some opportunities. It just depends on finding the right place. But we don't see it very often. We do for non-school district institutional food service. We do though, hospitals and universities, or particularly universities. Any other things we see as issues that are directly affecting us right now related to selling to schools that anybody wants to call out before we move on to lunch? Thank you so much for having us today. We hope to get to know all of you over the next couple of years, and we're really grateful to be able to work with Caroline and Kelly and Rachel and the team at Minda Lake, and are excited to be up here more and get to know the area more. Yeah.
Is food waste a problem at schools?
Oh yeah. Yeah, food waste is a huge issue. The states are going to require now AB something. The bill names they're all the same. I don't know. But school districts are big food producer or big retailers for food service operations. So they have to be responsible for their compost starting over the next couple of years, and they're having to phase that in. And the state's trying to work more with them to, on the local levels, loosen some restrictions around health code enforcement that allow for returning unused items that had to be taken, like an orange or even an apple, back into a share that gets washed and can be redistributed. Milk is also a big one on that. They can put the milk cartons, students don't eat their milk cartons, they'll do share tables. So any of those things that we don't work in it very often. We'll connect folks to resources, but the less waste is an issue, the more they'll be able to spend on their food. But that's also a big motivation for why they want to purchase from small local farms. It's because the food is so much better that the students are more likely to receive it, especially if you do like a taste testing or something like that.
Yeah. As it stands now, students are required to actually take a fruit or a vegetable, even if they don't want it. They can't just say, I don't want it. They actually have to take it, put it on their plate, and then they usually end up throwing it away or putting it somewhere else, or giving it to other students. So that's something that's been a challenge with food waste recently.
We have gotten really good feedback about our fruit in particular, some of our main crops are watermelon, cantaloupe, pears, and apples, and we've gotten really great feedback that the kids love them. So hopefully it is like what you're talking about, that local farms just grow tastier produce, and so people like it.
We also have flyers and business cards in the back if anybody wants to take any on their way out. Yeah, you're going to.
I have a question that's kind of related. So I work with a group that gleans fruit from around the county from people who have fruit trees.
Oh, cool.
And there's been an issue recently where they can't take it because of food safety things, and so they're not an approved source. They're just fruit trees from around the neighborhood. Is there anything that I should know that can overcome that hurdle?
Yeah, we have a community, like a colleague in another organization that runs a massive gleaning program in Sacramento, and I'm sure he'd love to help you because he pretty much built the whole program, so he's been navigating it for a long time, and they take from all different alleyways and people's backyards and stuff. That does not seem like a totally necessarily food safe environment. They make it happen. Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody else have any questions for us before we go over to lunch? And we're happy to talk to folks at lunch too. Yeah.
I guess, does the food hub have an idea of volume to tell farmers
We do for a lot of that, and I think usually for the sake of efficiency, we'll tell people really specific one-on-one information, but we'll go over some of the most popular crops later in the day. I think after lunch, we're going to do it before lunch, but I think after lunch we'll talk about melons briefly, and throughout the day we'll kind of mention some of the most popular crops that we know work really well for schools and get more information about that.
Thanks a lot, everybody. With that, we'll wrap up.